Hola amigos, bien o no, saludos desde Medellín y hoy nuestro tema, palabras confusas, confusable words. Sí, en inglés hay muchas palabras que puedo utilizar en esta forma u otra y también hay otra que parece la misma, pero ese es parte del tema de hoy. Hoy vamos a empezar con estas tres palabras: big, large, great. En un punto todo significa casi grande, pero también no. Vamos a mirar. So today we're going to look at confusable words. Now this might turn into a very long and ongoing series because there are lots. We're going to start with these three: big, large, great. Now we could translate these quite easily into Spanish as grande, but we use them in slightly different ways depending on the thing we're describing, and I hope this will be clear with some of these examples. So let's have a look. So one of the first things we have to look at is the thing we're talking about something that you can see, touch, smell, taste, hear, something you can experience with the senses? Because if it is, it's a concrete noun, like it's a physical thing that you can see or touch, for instance. And therefore, in that case, we would normally use big or large. Now, often these big or large is quite often interchangeable in the sentence. We're going to see some examples here where you could switch it for one word or the other and it means more or less the same. But be aware, usually if we use the word big, we're using this in a more informal way. So you will hear this said a lot because often when we're speaking we're a bit more informal. In writing you might see the word large used more often, but really the words are very interchangeable. Let's give some examples, you see what I mean. So here we go. Maybe one of my neighbours has come to visit me and he's standing on my garden and I'm like, look, get your big feet off my flowers, because he's squashing the plants. Get your big feet off my flowers. That's a more informal way of saying it, using big. If I said large, it sounds like I'm making a very formal statement. Your large feet off my flowers. We wouldn't necessarily say that unless we're trying to be funny or make some kind of joke. Generally, the general expression would be big. Wow, look, it's a really big, that big truck, that big lorry, something like that, yeah? Here's a different example. We're using a slightly more formal description. She is a small woman, but she has very large feet. She's a small woman, but she has very large feet. So that's a more formal description of what she looks like. She's small, but she's got large feet. Now you could say big in this case, it's true. But again, that's that split between a more formal or informal type of language. Yeah, she's a small woman, but she has very large feet. How about this one? It was a large house near the river. It was a large house near the river. Exactly the kind of description you'd see in a book, perhaps. It was a large house near the river. Often if we're talking, I say, look, that's a really big house. We might use that more. So when we're speaking, you might hear that more. How about this one? Serrano has a big nose. Serrano has a big nose. True enough. You could say large, but like the other example we did when we say she's a small woman with very large feet, if we say it like that, he has a big nose, well, it's true, and it's more like a, well, he has a big nose. He has a large nose. It's a very similar thing you could say, but if you start using the word large, it sounds more serious. It's more or less, it's almost like, in this case, perhaps more of a medical description. You know, he's a tall man with a large nose. Anyway, you get the idea. So big or large when we're talking about concrete nouns, things you can see, touch, physical things. If we're talking about something that's what we call abstract, an abstract noun is we're talking about something that you cannot touch, see, whatever. It's not a physical object. It's more like an idea, a feeling. And for that, we would use great. And sometimes we will use large, but only because we can count it. So generally for abstract stuff we use great and large if we can count it as a countable thing. Here's some examples. That's a great idea. Notice idea is an abstract thing. It's not something you can physically touch. It's an idea. That's a great idea. I have great respect for her. So the respect, again, it's an abstract idea. I have great respect for her. I have great respect for her. He will be making a great mistake. He will be making a great mistake. Now, notice this is one way to say it. He will be making a great mistake. That's quite a formal way of saying it, particularly, again, if you're writing it. More informally, you could say, he will be making a big mistake, or you're making a big mistake. So this is slightly the difference between what you might see written down. So maybe like in a journalist article, you might see he will be making a great mistake if he follows that policy. But perhaps if you were speaking to somebody, you might just say, look, you're making a big mistake. You know, a bit more informal. Here's an example of where we can use large instead of great, because the thing we're talking about we can count. There was a large error in the accounts. There was a large error in the accounts. He wrote a large part of the book while in hospital. He wrote a large part of the book while he was in hospital. You may say, well, how can you count that? It's a large part. What does that mean? Well, if you think about it, it's a book, it has pages, you could count the pages or the words. So in that sense, we can say that. He wrote a large part of the book while in hospital. Other ways we use big as well. There's some standard kind of phrases. Big business, big trouble. You're in big trouble. Sometimes as well, and this is more in a more informal way, so particularly when people are speaking, not so much when they're writing, but particularly when they're speaking, often we use the word great for emphasis on the word big. So it was a great big lie. So it wasn't just a big lie, it was a great big lie. It is a great big book. So physically, it's not just a big book, it's a great big book. Yeah? Of course, we could just say it's a great book, which means it's very good. That's a great book. That's a great film. Yeah? And again, another way we use, you might hear this more as emphasis, would be get your great big ugly shoes off of my clean floor. That's a phrase I've heard from my grandmother in the past, but that's another story. So notice you're using great as a way of emphasizing big. But these tend to be things we would say, not necessarily that we would write down. Yeah. So there we go. There's some examples of how we can use big, large, or great. So normally, big or large is for concrete things, physical objects. Great or large in this case is great. We use more for abstract ideas. We can use large if that thing is a countable idea, if you like. And notice when we said something like, it's a great book or it's a great film, you think, well, the book's a physical thing. This is true, but we're referring to the great in terms of the quality of it. And quality is not a concrete thing. Quality is an abstract thing, so we're using great to transmit the idea of quality. So it's a great book, it's a great film. Yeah, there we go. Okay, well, that's it for today for this one. Big, large and great. I hope you find that less confusing now. Déjame saber en los comentarios. Until next time, from Serrano and me, it's Cheerio.